what's going on, everybody? It's your buddy, it's your pal Spaz, Phoenix, the YWC Reality Check with another installment of fan answers. I only got 3 answers for this one, which leads me to maybe believe that you guys aren't latching onto this maybe as much as I thought you would. So if you are and you just haven't said anything yet, or if you are and you just like watching these videos, not necessarily participating, please put them down in the box below, because if the response continues to decline, I might reconsider doing this series. I did get answers. It's all fine. It's all well. It's all good. I'll have a new question up for you guys next Friday. I'm doing this on Saturday morning because my Friday night was full of other things and I didn't get a chance to do it. But last Friday I asked you guys, would you rather go with what we're seeing right now, which is Triple H versus Sting at WrestleMania, or would you rather have Triple H versus The Rock, for all the reasons I mentioned? And I was looking at it from a perspective of, here's this option, and here's what I think makes more sense. I think a lot of people that answered me are looking more of a ripple effect and how it could affect the rest of the roster, which was a really, really interesting change of perspective that I didn't really expect. But this is why I come to you guys. I have one perspective, you guys have many, and you guys make me think about different things. So the Zohan says, I wouldn't waste any time doing Sting versus Undertaker at WrestleMania. If you have Sting and Undertaker on the same roster at the same time, and don't do it as soon as possible, one more year goes by where something could go wrong. It's a big risk, and I wouldn't take. It's a big risk that I wouldn't take. Undertaker is 49 and Sting is 55. Together they're 104 years old. Fantastic. I would have Sting do something that doesn't involve Triple H or any other opponent, so by default I would have to say Triple H versus The Rock. And see, that's an interesting take. That's an interesting point. You're not necessarily telling me that you want Triple H versus The Rock because it's a better match. You're saying you would take Triple H versus The Rock because you want Sting somewhere else. You want to preserve that Sting versus Undertaker match as long as you can. Now, me personally, at this point, if you ask me, I never want to see Sting versus The Undertaker, only because, and I've said this many, many times before, we took a snapshot in our heads 15 years ago of what we thought that Sting versus The Undertaker, that match might look like, and it was fantastic at the time, wasn't it? The problem is, if we set up Sting versus Undertaker now, we're still going to have that snapshot in our mind. And let's face it, as you just mentioned, Sting and Undertaker are a combined 104 years old, and that's just not going to look the same. No matter how good an effort these guys put out, no matter how, I don't know how to say this, no matter how much their heart is in it, and no matter how much effort they put into it, that match isn't going to measure up to that 15-year-old snapshot. Which is why, for me, I guess, Undertaker versus Sting wasn't really a factor, especially when we consider where we think Undertaker's going, which I think is going to be a lot better. But it's good, because you got two. If you had Sting versus Undertaker and Rock versus Triple H on one Mania pay-per-view card, that would be fucking phenomenal, would it not? Thank you to the Zohan. Matt Jericho says, I can definitely go either way, but I'd be happy to, I'd be happy, but if I had to choose, I'd have to say Taker versus Sting, because the match needs to happen, and Undertaker already doesn't have a lot of matches left in him. I think that the build-up would be amazing, and even if the matches snow at the beginning, the end of the match would be epic no matter what. Also, Triple H versus Rock should happen at Mania to end the historic rivalry, and it would be a jaw for sure for both guys, and I could still say go for it. That's another one. Looking at it is a bit different. You're more looking at the Sting versus Undertaker booking. The booking, and this is what I will say about Bray Wyatt and Undertaker this year. The booking, in some ways, is hard, because you've got these two iconic characters that you want to make sufficiently creepy and sufficiently dark and threatening and almost terrifying to a certain degree. You've got two. It's kind of got that and I don't want to seem like I'm putting down either guy, but it's got that Freddy versus Jason angle to it, where there's no good guy, there's no shining light. It's not like Shawn Michaels coming down in his white vest sort of representing God. You got two very dark, at various points in their career, demonic guys coming at each other. So you want to have booking that represents that. On the other hand, because you have all that demonic, evil character background, all that, think about all the creative elements you have to play with. I mean, you got Sting with the birds and the bats and all the you see even with his intro, they've got that echoing crow sound already that sets a tone. The way Sting comes out, and there's nothing on the Titantron, or there's at least the first time he came out, there was nothing. Even the LED banners around the arena that just have the Raw or SmackDown logo on them are dead. Everything's black, and you've got that one spotlight. It's so simple that it's scary, and it's Sting, and we know what Sting can do, and it's fantastic. Also, at some point, not that I want to see him go like Joker Sting like TNA, but he has the ability, Steve Borden does, to play off a little bit of crazy. You can have that solemn, severe, serious, sort of anonymous, silent, enigmatic guy, but you've also got that other side of Steve Borden that he showed in TNA where he can be absolutely maniacal, crazy, sort of Dean Ambrose, Heath Ledger, Joker-ish, and you could bounce back and forth between the two, and you create an element where you never really know what you're going to get. There's a lot to play with there creatively. And with The Undertaker, we know the imagery we got there. He plays with lightning. He plays with fire. He brought out 21 caskets at the last WrestleMania. He's got the thunder, the lightning. He could WrestleMania of days gone by where he came down with the vulture perched on his shoulder. If he's got a vulture perched on his shoulder and he's going down to face Sting, who also has that sort of animalistic crow, scorpion mentality, there's a lot of animal imagery you could do right there. And just to see these two guys face off in the ring. We all know, when the Shield and the Wyatts stood in the ring for the first time and stared at each other, it was magic. When Triple H, when Undertaker came back about 4 or 5 years ago, and they announced it, Undertaker's coming back, everybody's like, well, why would you announce it? Why wouldn't you have it be a surprise? Undertaker comes out at the beginning of the show, has his entire spooky entrance, and before he can say a word, Triple H comes down to I think it was to the DX music, if I'm not mistaken, and he comes out before Undertaker can even say a word, and they just have that stare down, and they both look at the sign. And I know a lot of people, and I've heard Wrestling Jesus recently make reference to that being really, really lazy booking, but at the same time, it creates a moment. If they wanted to swerve us, and the Bray Wyatt thing is a swerve, and Undertaker came out to address Bray Wyatt, and was immediately confronted by Sting instead, that would be a moment. I would almost want them to say nothing. Sting, for years, said nothing. Undertaker, when he had Paul Bearer as his manager, not referee, as his manager on a regular basis, his entire promo was constricted down to 3 words. So we know that both of these guys can express a lot without saying a word, without all the bells and whistles and pyro and effects and video packages that we know that WWE is great. Without all that, these guys can create a moment. So with the creative machine of WWE behind them, this build would be fantastic. The unfortunate thing about all that is eventually all the smoke and mirrors has to clear, the pyro stops, the music stops, and the bell has to ring and there'll be a match. And I think as great as these guys are, and as great an entrance as these guys want, and as great build as these guys want, as great effects and packages and highlights and hype you can put behind this, I truly believe, with all the respect I have in my body for both of these guys, the match these guys are able to put on at this point will not measure up, and it's sad. And then you say on the other side of the coin, also Rock and Triple H should have to end a historic rivalry. This is the opposite side of the coin. This is a story that already exists. This is a story where literally all you have to do is throw up a highlight reel of these two guys' matches. Show them going from the blue blood aristocrat Hunter Hearst Helmsley and the young upstart, future Hall of Famer, as Jim Ross called him, with the bad hair and the feathers and shit, Rocky Maivia, to their battles over the Intercontinental Championship, to their ladder matches, to the Nation versus DX, to them fighting over the main title, to both of them becoming superstars larger than the World Heavyweight Championship. Just throw up a video package of that on any given Raw and announce at the end, hey, these guys are going to fight at Mania. There is your money right there. Again, I say, much like Zohan's comments, put these two matches on a WrestleMania, and everybody else on the card should thank these 4 guys, for sure. Logan Claymore has a little bit of a rambling answer that I'm going to have to go through slowly because it sounds like he changes his mind kind of midway, so I'm going to make it through this and then I'm going to say what I'd like to say. As interesting as Sting versus Triple H would be, I would have to go with Rock versus Triple H. For there's many reasons for this choice. First, as you mentioned, there's a history of rivalry between them, and it was set up on Raw for the past few months and at the Royal Rumble, so it would all be perfect. Book it as one last match between the two. The People's Champ versus the King of Kings. That's the final title that I was thinking of. Whereas before you had, the Connecticut Blue Blood and the new guy, you've got the King of Kings versus the People's Champ that everybody loves and adores and whatever. If you wanted to add a little flavor, you can make it career versus career, with both men's in-ring career being on the line. But I wouldn't go that route because it would make the winner obviously Triple H, seeing as The Rock doesn't come back that often. Anyway, Career versus career would be interesting. Career versus career, in-ring career versus in-ring career, it kind of telegraphs that whoever loses is going into the Hall of Fame the next year. And I might be the only one that thinks this, but I think that who goes into the Hall of Fame should genuinely be a surprise. I mean, the day they announced... Okay, this is not the best example in the world, but the day they announced Rikishi going into the Hall of Fame, the Usos announced it on Twitter earlier that day. Now, if you want to announce it, if you want to let something leak sort of the day before or the day of that they're going to announce that the person's going to the Hall of Fame, anyway, that's cool. But I don't want to have a feeling of it being telegraphed a year in advance. That's a little much for me. But then he goes a slightly different route and he says, hell, you could have Triple H versus Sting and have The Rock help Sting win the match, setting up a match between them at WrestleMania 32. Rock could go into the Hall of Fame the night before and then have one last match. Come to think of it, I like the idea of Rock versus Triple H at WrestleMania 32 more with the booking that I mentioned. That's interesting, because once again, that booking would go with the idea of maybe Sting's off doing something else, probably The Undertaker, and The Rock... that Sting wouldn't be off with The Undertaker. Sting would be with Triple H, and The Rock would be maybe a surprise? I don't know how you would do that, because then that does actually allow... how can I say this? I'm tripping over my words, guys, and I'm sorry for that. Because if you did this, if you had Sting versus Triple H, you would clearly have Bray Wyatt versus The Undertaker, which I think we're already building up to, and The Rock would be at WrestleMania for reasons, for like a backup segment or whatever. Now, if you have Undertaker versus Bray Wyatt, Triple H versus Sting, Rock interferes, costs Triple H the match, Sting wins. Next year, you go in, and you've got... the opportunity to have The Rock go in, as you say, go into the Hall of Fame the same year as Undertaker, which would be a bit weird. But then you could build Rock versus Triple H and Undertaker versus Sting throughout the entire year. And the reason I say that that's okay, and Bray Wyatt, I hope, would win this year, and he would go on to do other great things. But the reason I say build these two matches now, the reason I say announce Undertaker versus Sting for WrestleMania 32 and book it now. The reason I say announce Rock versus Triple H now and then have it build for a year is because it wouldn't be like Rock versus Cena, because none of these guys are there all the time. Whereas The Rock Cena had to sort of have his entire working year with The Rock hanging over his head with no real way of combating it, and that was weird, and that was one of those things where it's like, well, nothing Cena does this year is really going to matter. We know what he's doing at WrestleMania. But if we know that Triple H isn't active, The Rock isn't active, Sting isn't really active, and Undertaker isn't really active, and you just announce a year in advance, put some video packages together. Every couple of months, just put out a video package, put out some sort of have them have an altercation on, Jimmy Fallon or on TMZ or, one of those affiliates that WWE goes to constantly. Have The Rock being interviewed about his next movie project, The Scorpion King 6 million or whatever, and have Triple H walk on and pedigree. Can you imagine, say, The Rock is being interviewed by David Letterman. Triple H walks onto the Letterman set, pedigrees The Rock, and leaves. Obviously, Letterman and the crowd would have to sell it as if it was something that really happened, and yada yada yada. But these are two matches, because they're not active guys. They could produce them with small instances throughout the year, and then obviously when WrestleMania season hits, they have a couple conflicts on Raw and whatever. You could do that. The idea of The Rock costing Triple H his match with Sting after Sting has fucked with Triple H all year makes 100% sense. And so here's this Triple H's one chance at revenge on Sting. It gets taken away by The Rock. The Rock, who Triple H already has all this great history with. And then you come off of maybe The Undertaker loses to Bray Wyatt. and you know, Undertaker feels like he's no longer the big bad demon on the block, and Sting comes in at that opportunity, and maybe Sting's a bit heelish, a bit more of that crazy Joker Sting, and he, you know, being, maybe you want to instill a little bit of like of a vulture image. Maybe he wants to pick the bones of the Undertaker, and the Undertaker says, "Whoa, no, fuck that. His last match is against Sting." He puts down Sting the same way WWE put down WCW, or however you want to say it. Rock and Undertaker go into Hall of Fame the same year. Tell me that Hall of Fame alone wouldn't sell out. This is amazing. I will say, I went into this saying that I don't think a lot of people are latching onto this concept very well, but just with those 3 answers alone, you guys took a small little tiny idea, a small little tiny question that I asked you, and opened up so many creative possibilities in the company that, fuck it, this series isn't going anywhere. Tune in next Friday. My next fan interactions and answers has to do with the tag team division. Oh yes, so we're gonna have a lot of fun with that one. So anyway, to Zohan, to Matt, to Logan, thanks for your input. Thanks for being part of this. To those of you that are watching this but maybe haven't spread your wings and spread your voice and all that sort of thing, I encourage you guys, don't be shy. I ain't anything special on here. I'm just another guy like you. So speak up, please. Again, to those of you that have participated in this one in the past few, thank you to that. Ask the Phoenix is coming up in approximately 10 days, so go back to the January Ask the Phoenix. Put your questions down in that box below for that Q&A. Put your questions that are Fastlane specific in any one of my videos with the hashtag SPOK, and Connor and I will tackle those during the Tackle Preview show. All this interactive stuff that I've been trying to do the past little while, you guys have been great. Thank you. Thank you, because these types of things, like this fan interaction thing, like Ask the Phoenix, like the SPOK thing, these videos don't happen unless you guys give me something to work with, and you have, and it's great. So thank you very much. This has been a lot of fun. I thought we were going to have a lot more conversation about The Rock and Triple H's history, but that didn't quite happen. And again, this is why I come to you guys for what you guys want to talk about. I've been Spaz, your YWC Reality Check. Subscribe up there, talk down there, start a conversation, keep all these conversations going. Don't be a stranger. I'll talk to each and every last one of you later, but for right now, I am tagging out. Bye, guys.